Hey everybody, welcome to I'm always so interested to see how close I get to perfectly matching the actual theme song. Djogawa Djororx, Dog Days, Episode 2, or Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is done. That's right, it only took me like a year to do, and it's actually already been up on nga.org/comic for like a few weeks now, maybe like 2 or 3 weeks at this point, but I'm only just now getting a chance to make a video to talk about it. But I actually successfully completed Chapter 2 of Djogawa Djororx, and I'm already starting to work on Chapter 3. I just kind of wanted to make this video, not to like necessarily talk about like the plot of it or anything, but more specifically to talk about some of the things that I had to do to the Arodjun language in order to make it, right? Because there's a lot of dialogue in there, and as you may or may not know, the comic is available to read in English and in Arodjun just by like toggling the button of the language. There's a little en/AR button on there that switches the language between English and Arodjun. So yes, I did indeed translate literally every bit of dialogue and a lot of other stuff too from English into Arodjun so that you could read the comic in both languages. So logically, that meant that I had a lot of new constructions, new words, a whole bunch of different things I had to add to Arodjun in order to make all of that dialogue possible. And there's no better way to find out what things your language is missing than to try and just translate, the stuff that you're already working on in your in your like native language into it, and see what kind of things you might be missing, what kind of things would be better added, and what kind of purposeful constraints you might want to put on the language to make it more interesting. And so I'm going to put on a screen that's half just a kind of the time lapse from Procreate. I just downloaded all of the time lapses from both Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. So, I mean, technically, I guess it's not really spoilers because it's small enough on the screen that, I don't know, it probably shouldn't be a problem. But if you haven't read the comic yet, I highly recommend that you go read it. It's just on there. It's available for free. Just go enjoy it. But, if you get interested enough that you want to learn Arodjun, then, oh, look at that. I have all of my YouTube shorts of Arodjun 101, and I have that book, Grammar of the Arodjun Language, which is available on Amazon for $25 US. So there's a lot of things that you could do to improve your Arodjun experience. You might even be able to read the comic in Arodjun instead of just looking at the fact that it's translated and being like, ooh, that's pretty. But we're going to do that for this video. Feel free to look at the comic translated into Arodjun and go, oh, that is pretty. Look at that. It is Arodjun. I believe you. Yes, do believe me. Please believe me. It is actually Arodjun. I'm not like those other fiction works that pretend to have a conlang but it's not actually a conlang. I'm looking at you, amphibia, with your ancient frog or whatever. I had so much hope. Anyway, let's go take a look at the comic. Let's see what I did. And let's look at my documentation to see what exactly I had to do to Arodjun in order to make Chapter 2 of the comic possible. So, let's see. Okay, so the first thing I should mention is that I should have done this for Chapter 1 as well, but I did not do that because I was not planning on anyone ever seeing the glosses and stuff that I was making during the creation of Chapter 1 of the comic. I kind of just made them very informal glosses and went along with it, added things to the Arodjun dictionary as I went along, and I occasionally added notes in the form of comments. Now, I didn't do it for every time that I created a grammatical construction, but I did it sometimes, right? So like I just wrote here like, in pursuit of Bez, which is like kind of the name of the universe, and also it's the title of the book on the very first page of the comic. It's supposed to say peace and letting go in pursuit of Bez, and it says pursuing towards Bez is the literal translation of it, right? So fair like that. And then you can go along and you could see that I have been making all these glosses, again, relatively informal glosses, for me to see, for me to utilize, just to make sure that I got the grammar correct whenever I was creating things. And so, as we go along the pages, you have the English text that's visible on the English panel of the screen, and then you had sometimes I would have to do like a literal translation just to make things easier for me to write out in Arodjun. Then you had the morpheme listed intralinear section of the gloss here, and then you had the Arodjun version after I finished going through the dictionary and translating things, and so on and so forth. The major thing for the first chapter of the comic was making all these various filler words and different phrases and things that people would say on a regular basis, because I had not created those yet. Things like, oh, just being ein, right? Stuff like that. And just making sure that I had all those filler words, all those phrases, all those really simple adverbs and things, like how the various filler words we would say for like just and and oh and okay and yeah, stuff like that. Also onomatopoeias like scree turning into chi, right? Stuff like that, you know? I just wanted to make them original but still relatively recognizable as onomatopoeias whenever I could, whenever they came in the form of like dialogue and stuff like that. Additionally, I did not write down every change that I made in here because I did a lot of changes and still made a few spelling mistakes with the word stress. And you may notice that if you happen to be good enough at Arodjun to notice where I made a mistake on either doubling a vowel or doubling a consonant. Linguistically in Arodjun, there's no like phonemic difference between geminating a consonant and lengthening a vowel, but both have the effect of, you know, putting primary stress either on those doubled vowels or on the vowel before a double consonant. It's just whether it's a vowel that gets doubled or a consonant that gets doubled is based on a pattern that exists only in the writing, which I describe in the Arodjun showcase. As we go along, we have a few situations here. Look, I wrote, oh, future subjunctive rule needs to be explained. Great, thanks. Like that's helpful, right? And then this is the first of several instances where the at preposition, the mu that goes over here, ends up meaning about. So like, what are you talking about? Oh, what are you thinking about? Stuff like that. That was one of the earliest changes that I made to Arodjun while writing the script. Then again, more literal translations, some more situations for like the future subjunctive again. I guess I do end up explaining it. And so on and so forth, right? In this situation, I explain why I used a habitual marker, I guess. In this sentence, I thought is preterite, while was safe is habitual, as if the thought happening is instantaneous, while the island being safe is something that existed over a long and indefinite span of time. And that is my justification for using like the habitual right there, I guess. More literal translations. This one says, Viaggio che mi verrò modlacle would all appear as an adjectival phrase on a sentence tree. Dear God. This whole phrase, learned by us today, is subordinate to the noun vorawa. Also, the noun hlaqa is in the nominative and null case because it is fully immersed as part of this adjectival phrase and doesn't truly act as any case. And that's actually a pretty important one. There's actually been a lot of other situations now where the so-called nominative / null case, which is actually more of like a reflexive pronoun in most situations, takes place when a pronoun has to show up inside of these nested clauses, nested subclauses, nested phrases inside of a main clause. That's something I had never had to do before in some of the original translations and things I did for Arodjun, and that ends up being more and more common later on. So you'll start seeing those nominative, reflexive, null pronouns appear in various situations as the comic goes on. But that was, I think, the very first time that I had to do that, because why else would I leave a note about it? But down, oh, here we go, 2 layers of subordination in this clause, just like how it works in English. Oh, God. Oh, man. Okay. So this is the closest I've gotten to cracking the code, most close, that perfective, be me, for fine answer, the, oh god. So yeah, so it's a when subordination followed by an inai subordination. That doesn't happen too often. There's nothing too special about it, honestly. This must be just one of the first times that I noticed that I had to use it. I guess I didn't have to use it. It's my creative project, but I think I chose to allow that to be something that can happen. Oh god, would you look at this? Pretty sure I mentioned situations like this in the book, but this is an if-then conditional statement using the conditional particle nya instead of the more common word for if. In this situation, nya is a more appropriate word to use because this is a positive phrase doing the work of the entire if statement. It literally would be with our eyes inside out, would the world look at us? The nominative suffix is notably used in the with our eyes inside out part. While this is not entirely required, it helps clarify that the appositive phrase is indeed appositive, and by the nature of it not being followed by a pro word, it is clear that this phrase is entirely dependent on the clause that follows it. That's always kind of been the case, but most of the time, accusative suffixes are left out because the accusative is extremely easy to assume. But in this situation, the nominative suffix is used, most likely just because of how convoluted the sentence is, just to make sure that it is separated grammatically from the object that follows it. So you can nominalize a verb by sticking a case marking on it. Most of the time it's if you stick a case marking on the non-physical version of the verb in question. Sometimes it can be the entire verb, though this is a bit childish. Okay, so it looks like there's a bit of an idiolect thing going on here too. This is the first time I'm looking at all of this on the chapter 1 dialogue, by the way. And it is that idiolectal situation in this case, because this is the entire verb right here, puram. The intransitive version of it, that is. The intransitive version of si, puram, with the genitive marker bois on it. So it says, guns of seeing. Guns of seeing, guns of sight, I guess. This situation right here, kuzewen hiswemik io, right? That is ungrammatical technically. This just introduces the idea that sometimes the third person singular present tense pro word yo can be a little bit superfluous if the context of the conversation makes it very clear who the subject of the primary clause in a when plus subordinate clause is. Not too complicated. That happens a lot. I said expect to see this more often going forward. Me from 2 years ago. It does indeed happen a lot going forward. You'll probably see that. And it's not a mistake. It is technically ungrammatical to the way the typical grammar of the language works, but it happens a lot. Then the next one, right here, for hands up, it says, again, when the noun and pronoun is obvious, you can just say the word in its transitive form and leave the rest up to context, right? This is extremely important. This also happens a lot, and it's going to continue happening a lot, right? Just because this verb right here, chichama, which means raise, ends with this letter A right here, that implies that it is transitive, right? It's transitive, and it should say, raise your hands up. But in this situation, it's just raise them. There is an object, but it is extremely obvious what this guy wants. He wants them to put their hands up because they're being captured, essentially. This is an interesting one right here. This word, which is supposed to be arm sphinx moth thing, right? So, keklu tuftmao. This right here has the root word for arm, which is kekla, right? No vowel at the end, and it's epenthesized using the noun epenthesis rules that you can see either in the Arodjun book or the document, the Google Sheet. And this is because that epenthesis pattern for a noun is kind of built in by default into the brain of a native Arodjun speaker. In this case, this person is making up a word, moth arm thing. right? Moth arm, the moth arm right here is a made-up word, and it's just emphasizing the fact that this is a made-up word. There's a dash connecting it in the writing, and this epenthesis is going on here. If this was a real word in the language, it probably would follow the same exact pattern, but I'm just pointing out here that for made-up words, a native Arodjun speaker would probably still be able to properly assess which vowel would need to be epenthesized between two incompatible consonants. Oh man. Okay, then we have this clause highlighted here. So, why is it yom wu and not yom yu? This is a question on whether it should be the future tense, wu, or the present tense, yu. This is a subjunctive clause, part of the sentence saying, let them go, or allow that they go. The command, kainawenrue, is a present tense command, technically. However, it's a command that is immediate, given the prior condition, if they are dead, is met. The subjunctive, they go here, is most likely to match with the conditional that began the sentence, since the entire situation is thus taking place in the future. That conditional clause that begins the sentence, if they are dead, or as prekachniawu, literally translates to, if they are to indeed be dead, which is a conditional set entirely in the future. This is something that I, as an English speaker, have a hard time describing in simple words. Quote me, June 1st, 2023. This also happens a few other times in the future. This is just the first time that I had to deal with a situation like that. This one is on this section of the gloss here. Cover your faces and plug the leaks. So normally you might think that cover your faces and plug the leaks would each need their own ru command marker pro word combo. However, by using the interclausal and wa, you can make this sentence a whole syllable more efficient. Now, this could occasionally be a cause for confusion, considering wa is also the future first person pro word, but that's a quirk that is usually handled with context. Okay, so the only reason that I wrote this one down is because that wa right there is after a verb. Usually that would end the clause. That would be a future first person singular, right? But in this situation, this wa is the interclausal and, except it's saving a syllable by removing the need to put another rue in there. And then this is also something that becomes much more common later. Just having nyayo, it's not necessarily actually just the conditional marker with the present third singular pro word. This is like a phrase on its own. This is essentially an adverb. Nyayo, maybe it is so that. It's just a way of saying maybe, perhaps. And then finally at the very end, the last thing to be continued is jawo. And basically, it will be continuing to go on or to be so. It's saying this is not the end of the story. The story will be continuing, thus to be continued. I think that's a pretty clever translation of it. And that is all of chapter 1's translation notes, though there's a bunch of other stuff that I had to do to the Arodjun language in order to make the dialogue in that chapter complete. Anyway, on to chapter 2. This is just me reminding myself that va can be used as a conjunction in addition to as a preposition. This right here refers to never, or fekun, right? The adverb never in a copular clause can only immediately precede the subject pro word since there's no proper verb for it to connect to. That actually applies to all adverbs. The way I wrote that makes it sound like it's specifically the adverb never, but in a copular clause, it really is, since it's just a subject pro word there at the end of the sentence, and it has to end the sentence. You can't end the sentence with an adverb unless it's completely separated from the clause that it's associated with. It goes immediately preceding it, which is just kind of a weird place for an adverb to go. I see why I specified it. Probably just so that I made sure that I knew I wasn't making a mistake. Okay, this is an interesting one. There's another example a few lines down, and you can see that there's two slightly different meanings. Both of these have to do with time having passed since something, using this verb pathema. Pathema is for time to pass. Here I say, in this case, the Zeshan girl is literally saying, I experienced or passed almost 2 days since having eaten. And it uses the pro word in the past tense, ka, right? So ka here, you would think it should be in the present, ya, and not the past, to match how Kira discusses the passage of time from the perspective of the present, as you'll see a few lines down. However, in this case, the girl can mean two things. First, she can mean, I just experienced almost 2 days since having eaten, as in she's really hoping that those 2 days are over, or that they are over, but she doesn't know when her next meal will be afterwards. Or it can mean, I, at some point, experienced almost 2 days since having eaten, and given the context, the first one is pretty obvious. I won't talk about the context necessarily, but it's the first one. In this case, that sentence being Bafema femichro Djogawa wen jamiem ka. And here is the other use of the verb pafema. So in this situation, the sentence is Pafawen hue maroka yo jaume rimaklek u. Literally, 1 week passes that they tried to take you. Using the verb of passage for time, pafem usually creates a sentence like this when talking about the amount of time that has passed since a past event from the perspective of the present. So this is a completed action in the past, as opposed to one that is either entirely contained within the past or is one that is potentially not complete. If Kira was telling a story in the future, she could have said something like as opposed to maroka yo in this situation, using the present pro word, right? To say 1 week had passed since they tried to take you. That's a very interesting one. It really boggled my mind for a little bit when I was trying to come up with a grammatical difference between those two constructs, and the fact that it was just whether or not I used the present or a past tense pro word for really the opposite of what an English speaker would think is intuitive. I had to write it down just in case. Oh God, all I'm specifying is that this might be the thickest sentence yet, as it is a very complex sentence. As the city judges have ordered, we will be among the lucky first people who can, so early, with our own eyes, see the wolf briefly staying at the zoo of Sarbisi. In the previous chapter, we used the at verb suffix to discuss the concept of knowing about something, right? Here, like know at, think at, right? In this situation, though, we're talking about a fact. So I think what I was trying to distinguish here is that in this situation, the phrase here to, makata, is referring to a fact that this person had. In the previous chapter, we used think at, and I think that was most likely the difference, in that think that is about someone's thoughts or opinions, not necessarily about a concrete fact. This situation, about, is using to. Here I am finally announcing what percent, so tg, or I could also use va, which means from or away from. So kukekek va miare or kukekek tg miare could both be valid words for referring to percentages. Here we go. This is another one of those situations, just like using lar as my. In this situation, I have to specify that not only is a genitive pronoun being used to describe subject itself, but it needs to have the ka marker after it, because this clause has an object and a subject, thus activating the need to require the ka suffix for the nominative in this situation. So with me has been shown to adopt a dative construction. By me, I've only just now noticed I need to write a rule about this. Indeed, I did. There are now a few different prepositions or conjunctions that by default activate the dative case instead of the accusative case. And this was the first time that I even thought about that concept, but because of this, there are now a few exceptions that create dative cases on nouns by using various conjunctions or prepositions. Oh God. We're looking at this little section right here. This little section warranted all of this. So the question is, and how did my mom not see you? So airak ochai purama kaya paihka lark aihi. Right? Specifically this little part here. Airak ochai. A specification with the question words and phrases if I haven't done so yet. When the question clause is self-contained, as in the question suffix modifies a direct object or has no object, it can be done as such. A night of freedom, how to spend it, becomes fechem chemera feikauj buatu wachai. But when the question involves a subordinate clause to be asked, it looks like this, the and how did my mom not see you sentence. So airak ochai purama klaya paihka lark aihi, which literally means, how was it so my mom didn't see you? This is very important, but as one grammatical sentence in Arodjun. Notice that the suffix chai only goes in the clause asking how is it so, while the statement of fact, my mom didn't see you, doesn't end with chai, because it is in fact a statement of fact. Basically, it's saying, my mom didn't see you, how is it so? But it's all put into one sentence. As you can see, the one sentence ends with a question mark, but the question suffix in the pro word is placed up here because they're asking a question, but the question is about how a fact happened. So it doesn't need the chai at the end here, if that makes sense. This is me specifying that though I've mentioned multiple times that there are subjunctive-esque circumstances in Arodjun, there is no actual subjunctive in Arodjun. So this sentence right here says, would the renegade Casanocians have been sufficiently confident to hijack a ship and nearly kidnap you if the Alkins might still hold power? This is another if-then statement, and that is basically used to cover for the fact that the English sentence, if the Alkins were still in charge, can't really happen in Arodjun. This is explaining not to think of the va in this vahoror phrase as a true preposition or conjunction, and that is because saying vahoror is like the hell in a what the hell phrase. It basically saying like vahoror is the same thing as saying what the hell. And in this situation, since it's part of another sentence that includes the question bana, right? What the hell are you talking about? The vahoror exists as part of this clause, but that's not an actual preposition. And that's it. Yep, those are the big notes that I had in there. And please do not ignore the massive amounts of changes that I had to do to the Arodjun language that weren't specified on this document. And by that I'm referring to the significant revamp of the Arodjun document, the spreadsheet that you can see if you go to nga.org/languages/Arodjun. That spreadsheet is in version 12 now. I can no longer call it version 11 because I had to do such sweeping changes to improve the readability, usability, and contents of it, including adding in some of the new grammatical constructs and things that have been put into the language during the creation of the comic. First of all, I have a nice chart with some of the fundamental verbs because I was starting to get really annoyed of like going to the dictionary and typing in like, I don't know, like to happen or something, when I use the phrase happen in so many other definitions that it shows up like 50 times. So there are some very fundamental verbs and some very fundamental nouns and a basic explanation of how the pro words work and of how the various suffixes and prefixes that can be slapped onto nouns work, along with just a straight up Zipfian kind of situation here where I found all the words in Arodjun by frequency that were found in both Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 of the comic as of July 2024. So I need to update it now. It might slightly change, but I have a feeling that these most common words in the language, essentially, you know, what could likely make up a potential Swadesh list for Arodjun. Not all of it, because a lot of these are just different conjugations of the pro word, but a lot of it are there. So this could be helpful. A lot of the most common words that you'll be seeing could be explained in there. I did not finish putting down all these definitions, though. I'll do that some other time. Then, of course, I have a grammar guide, which goes through some of the most basic elements of creating sentences and things like that. And I will be doing more on that eventually. I split what was originally just the tables sheet into two distinct phonology and morphology sheets, right? And so this sheet here, the phonology one, just has the actual phonemes, the stress patterns, and the epenthesis patterns. The morphology sheet then has the various pro-word conjugations, pronoun inflections, the additional aspect and mood markers and different things that you could put onto nouns, all the morphemes, all the morphemes and stuff like that, and all of the conjunctions and prepositions, and some information here about those situations like this one where using the with preposition generates a dative noun for pronouns specifically. Then, of course, we get to the world-famous dictionary, which now has Proto-Cern-Cahelan ID numbers attached to it. And you would not believe what a brutal, brutal piece of work it was to get consistent Proto-Cern-Cahelan IDs. Because if you remember, several years ago, I made the horrible decision of making Arodjun first and then reverse evolving Phosphon out of it. One of my biggest freaking mistakes of all time, in all honesty. Do not do that unless you don't really plan on making a whole damn language family out of it, because that created a whole lot of work for me. But now I know that there are approximately 1,127 root words in Arodjun. There's actually a few more, but now every root word, which has been re-evolved from Phosphon, I deleted all the original ones that weren't associated with Phosphon at all, went back to the Phosphon dictionary, took those, and then made those the original roots that get the root IDs and reinserted it into this dictionary. So basically all the empty spots have been completely revamped as to what their contents are and as to their ID numbers and what Proto-Cern-Cahelan word they came from. All of that comes together into the absolutely world-famous All Cern-Cahelan Dictionaries document. It's definitely still not done, and this might be a spoiler for a future video right here, technically, but I successfully, after a whole lot of brute force to match all the things that were inconsistent, have managed to get a single unified Proto-Cern-Cahelan ID number and eventual etymology attached to every word that was generated for Prince, Noshin, Fwanel, again coming soon, Arodjun, Permachikan, and Alkan. All of them are Proto-Cern-Cahelan derived languages. The ones on the right side of the PSC roots are the Cahelan languages, and the ones on the left are the Cern languages that I've made so far. So as I make more languages in this family, expect to see this document grow. But if you go to nguhmail.org/languages, you'd be able to see this spreadsheet here with just the all Cern-Cahelan unified dictionary. So that I did because of some things that are coming up in the comic that I will not show you yet, but I needed to be able to create cognates and loan words, and I figured that this would be the most practical way for me to identify exactly what Phosphon, Proto-Cern-Cahelan root word, those cognates and loan words would eventually derive from. Soon you'll start seeing more words in Arodjun that share the same Proto-Cern-Cahelan ID, but were borrowed from other languages at a later date. So I think that's going to be pretty damn cool. And I did that for the comic for reasons that I will not get into yet. Of course, with the comic came a lot of slang. There's a whole lot of slang, which you can see on the slang page of the dictionary. The slang page here also contains all the filler words and things in Arodjun. So the filler words, the ums, the pf, the pst, all that stuff are usually labeled as interjections or filler words and stuff on the type column of the slang document. I revamped the numbers page because there's a lot of different types of numbers in Arodjun. It's relatively scientific how each one is derived, but with some irregulars for these smaller numbers. And then the cardinal numbers are all listed here. And of course the alphabet. You can see if you want to read the actual Jopetoj symbols. I have the Jopetoj symbols all listed out here, what their name in the alphabet is in Arodjun, and of course the actual order of the Arodjun alphabet, right? As you'll see, the Arodjun order is here, the English order is here, that they can be sorted accordingly. Map names, again, this is still not complete, but this shows, like if you looked at a map that was written in Arodjun, what you would see and what they're derived from, etc. And I'm not done. There's still a lot of other things that I need to do on there. Naming conventions are on here, so you can see exactly what kind of common names there are in the Fuanal Peninsula based on what region of the Fuanal Peninsula that person is from, most likely. And so there's nicknames, there's alterations, there's origins, like etymologies for the names, a lot of which are just unknown because I just actually straight up have no idea. And yep, that's also going to be developed more in the future. Anyway, I've done a lot for this, and I hope you go and check out the comic because I put a lot of work into it. I think in the past month, like 4,000 people have come back to read the comic after the random burst of like 40,000 back in December. So I like it. People are reading the comic. And I think you should read the comic too, Djogawa Djororx. Now, wasn't that just special? That just makes you want to go over to nga.org/comic, read the comic, learn some Arodjun, maybe buy the Arodjun grammar book, and then because you're just feeling so generous, become a patron over on patreon.com/nga. Look at all these patrons. Look at all these amazing patrons and YouTube channel members, because there's also a join button below. Isn't that just like so cool? Isn't that just such a cool thing? They're all just so precious. Just so precious and sweet. Oh. Anyway, yeah, hope you enjoyed that. Hope you enjoy my comic. Chapter 3 is coming. Chapter 3 has already begun development on my iPad. Nobody shall see it until I have a few of the pages done, though, because I'm still tweaking some things about the final edition of the script for it. I'm going to try and get it done quicker. I've really gotten myself into a good, flow state for drawing the pages, so hopefully it shouldn't take anywhere near as long as Chapter 1 did, and even less time than Chapter 2 did. Let's hope. Let's hope. And I hope you think that my art has improved since Chapter 1, because, goddamn, I already look back on some of the pages from Chapter 1, and I'm like, yucky. Hopefully you don't think it's yucky, but hopefully you do think Chapter 2 is drawn better than Chapter 1. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway, I will see you all next time. Goodbye. Nga is out. Mwah.